Have you ever opened your door at 3 a.m. and discovered your entire life was about to change? Eliana Hart, a shy girl who worked as a children's librarian in Boston, never imagined that one small act of kindness would lead her to the most inspirational journey of her life. At 27, she lived in a modest apartment where the radiator clanked and borrowed picture books were her only companions. Her ex had called her too ordinary before leaving. She'd carried those words like stones ever since. But at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, everything shattered. The medical alarm tore through silence the building's emergency alert system. Her phone lit up, "Emergency contact June Whitaker Unit 12B." Her heart hammered. Yesterday, while chatting in the apartment lobby, the sweet 80-year-old with silver hair had asked almost shyly, "Would you fill out this form, dear, just in case? My son travels so much." This shy girl had signed without thinking. Now she was running down the hallway in pajamas, hands shaking. She used the manager's emergency key. Inside, June was gasping, eyes wide with terror, her respiratory device knocked askew. Eliana dropped to her knees. She'd learned sign language caring for her deaf cousin. Her hands moved fast, signing, "I'm here. Breathe with me. 1, 2, 3. June's trembling fingers signed back, "Can't. Breathe." The door flew open. A man in a gray suit, tall, sharp, blue eyes, impossibly composed for 3 in the morning, strode in with building security. He saw his mother struggling and something cracked in his controlled face. He knelt beside Eliana. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. Eliana didn't know who he was. She only knew they had seconds. Together they steadied June's breathing, Eliana signing calmly, while the stranger held his mother's hand with surprising gentleness. The on-call doctor arrived. This heartwarming moment of strangers working together saved a life. As June's color returned, security whispered to the building manager, "That's Nolan Whitaker, the CEO." Eliana's stomach dropped. Those blue eyes met hers, not cold, not dismissive, grateful. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm Nolan. I'm just next door." June's weak fingers signed to her son, "Son, she's very good." What happens when an invisible woman becomes the only person a billionaire's mother trusts? By morning, Eliana's world had tilted. Nolan Whitaker wasn't just any CEO. Whitaker Innovations, educational technology, artificial intelligence learning platforms, billion-dollar valuations. And here he was at her door with white tulips, looking uncertain. "May I come in?" Her tiny apartment suddenly felt impossibly small, stacks of picture books, crayon drawings on the fridge, a mug reading "Read More Books." He took it all in with quiet attention. "You're a librarian." "Children's section, Riverside Public Library." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. "My mother told me about you. She said you read to children using sign language." Eliana nodded, unsure where this was going. "The doctor's coming this afternoon. Would you stay? She seems more comfortable with you." "I have a morning shift." June's voice, still raspy, came from the doorway. "You tell stories beautifully. Please stay." How could this shy girl refuse such a heartwarming request? At the downstairs tea shop, Nolan insisted on paying. Then something unexpected happened. He quietly arranged through the building manager to cover every senior resident's prescription pickup that day. Eliana's friend Mara texted, "Don't trust CEOs. They major in public relations, not real feelings." Eliana's defenses rose. Was this performance? Was she just another opportunity for the kind billionaire's image? But watching him with June changed something. The way he adjusted her pillows without being asked. How he remembered she preferred chamomile over green tea. His hands were gentle. His voice, when he thought no one listened, carried exhaustion. "I should have moved her somewhere with better medical access," he murmured to the doctor. "She doesn't want safer," Eliana found herself saying. "She wants familiar." His eyes found hers. "You understand her." "I understand lonely." The words slipped out, but Nolan didn't look away. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Nolan would arrive early mornings before flights to New York or San Francisco. He'd check on June, then linger, asking Eliana about her work, listening intently when she described the new reading initiative. $20,000 short. The project might not happen. "What would you do with the funding?" he asked on the library steps one afternoon. "Create a space where every child feels seen, especially the deaf ones, or those who don't speak English at home or feel invisible." His gaze held hers too long. "Do you ever think about expanding your impact?" She bristled. "I do, but I'm good right here in the small places." He nodded slowly. "You're right. That matters most." 3 days later, an anonymous email arrived at the library. Riverside Kids Fund approved exactly $20,000. Mara was certain it's him. Has to be. Eliana felt conflicted. She didn't want charity, didn't want to be someone's project. That evening, June invited her for tea. "He talks about you," June said softly, holding her teacup with both hands. "Not many people make my son slow down. Mrs. Whitaker, I can't accept money if it's from him. Child, I've watched you 3 months. You think no one sees you, but I do." June's wrinkled hand covered hers. "You give so much. Let someone give back." That weekend, Nolan brought June to the library. Story time was in full swing, Eliana reading Where the Wild Things Are, signing every word. The room, filled with children of all abilities, was completely silent, completely captivated. She glanced up once and saw Nolan in the back row, watching her like she was something remarkable. Afterward, in the late afternoon light on the library steps, he said, "The way you used sign language to settle the whole room, that was remarkable." She gave a bashful smile. "Kids will listen if we truly listen to them." They walked along the Charles River as March gave way to April. He told her about his father's early death, the weight of legacy, how he'd sacrificed his 20s building a company. She told him about being called not bright enough by her ex, about believing she'd never be remarkable. "You're wrong," Nolan said simply. "Remarkable isn't loud." That evening, they sat on a bench overlooking the Charles, nothing flashy, just a simple view. They shared vulnerabilities like exchanging fragile gifts. When their fingers brushed, they held hands, honoring boundaries. This heartwarming connection felt real. They didn't kiss, just held hands, feeling the possibility between them. But across town in a glass tower, Chief Operating Officer Caleb Rourke reviewed a risk assessment memo. The CEO appears distracted by a librarian. Caleb's expression hardened. Sentiment was bad for quarterly growth. He made 2 calls, one to public relations to leak the relationship, one to an investment fund eager to access student learning data. The plan had started moving. Next morning's tabloid hit like a slap. Shy librarian lands a billionaire Whitaker's secret girlfriend revealed. Eliana stared at her photo taken outside the library without her knowledge. The article painted her as calculating, ambitious, strategic. Comments poured in accusing her of being a social climber who probably faked the emergency. Her phone exploded. The library director called, "Take a few days, sir, let this settle." She felt exposed, dissected. Nolan called repeatedly. She didn't answer. June did. "Come over, child, please." How do you protect someone when they don't know they're already a target? Eliana went feeling hollowed out. June made tea with shaking hands, and Eliana noticed the tremor was worse. "I need to tell you something." June's voice was steady despite the shake. "That library funding, it wasn't Nolan." Eliana looked up, confused. "It was me. I've been donating to Riverside Kids Fund for 6 years, ever since I retired from teaching." June's eyes were bright. "When you told me about your reading project, I knew exactly what to do. I wanted to help keep you with the children." Tears burned Eliana's throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have accepted it. You'd have thought it was pity." June squeezed her hand. "But it wasn't. You reminded me why I became a teacher. Children need advocates who see them. You're that person." June set down her teacup, and for a moment her eyes grew distant. "My husband Nolan's father used to say that real wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you give away to people who'll multiply it with love." Her voice cracked slightly. "I taught elementary school for 37 years. I watched children light up when someone finally saw them. When you talked about those kids at the library, I saw that same light in your eyes. The light I'd been missing since I retired." Eliana's chest tightened. "You were lonely too. We were two invisible women, weren't we?" June smiled sadly. "Me, the elderly widow everyone worried about. You, the shy girl everyone overlooked. But we saw each other." The door opened. Nolan walked in, rain-soaked, still in his suit from an emergency board meeting. Water dripped from his hair, his tie was loosened, and his normally composed face showed cracks of exhaustion. He caught the tail end of their conversation. "You knew about the money." His voice was careful, controlled, but underneath something raw and wounded. "I just found out this minute," Eliana said, meeting his eyes. "But you've been visiting her every day." He looked between them, and Eliana saw it, the fear that she'd been managing his mother for access. The same fear he'd probably carried his whole life, wondering who wanted him versus who wanted his wealth. Eliana's expression hardened. "I came because your mother treats me with kindness. Because I was lonely. Not everything is a transaction, Nolan." He flinched, and she realized she'd struck deeper than intended. His shoulders sagged slightly. This man who commanded boardrooms, who made decisions affecting thousands of employees, suddenly looked lost in his mother's small apartment. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've spent so many years suspicious of everyone's motives that I've forgotten how to trust the simple truth. That someone might actually care." The air between them crackled with misunderstanding, and something deeper, the shared wound of people who'd learned to protect themselves by assuming the worst. June's hand suddenly pressed against her chest. She gasped, face draining of color. Panic flooded the room. Nolan hit the emergency button. Eliana moved on pure instinct, pulling June upright, hands flying in sign language. Slow breaths, "Match mine, we're okay, 1, 2, 3. She used the breathing technique she'd learned with her deaf cousin, who had respiratory issues, keeping June focused, keeping her present. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes. Felt like hours. At the hospital, while Nolan handled paperwork and made calls, Dr. Ava Collins, a cardiology resident, found Eliana in the waiting room, still in her day clothes, hands shaking. "You kept her stable through the critical window. That breathing technique was perfect. My cousin taught me. She's deaf and has respiratory challenges. I just knew what might help." Dr. Collins studied her with professional respect. "You just saved the golden minutes. That probably saved her life." Meanwhile, Nolan was in the hallway on his phone. His face was composed, but his hands were shaking. The board was in crisis mode. When he emerged, Eliana stood. What happened? Someone leaked our internal pilot project data to the press, connected it to the situation with us. My chief operating officer, Caleb, is pushing to accelerate a deal with an investment fund to stabilize the stock price. He rubbed his eyes. They want to purchase aggregated student learning data from our educational platform. Student data like children's information, reading patterns, learning challenges, behavioral indicators, test performance. His jaw tightened. Caleb says it's anonymized, legal, profitable. And you? He looked at her directly. I keep hearing your voice. Kids will listen if we truly listen to them. Taking their data without real consent isn't listening. It's exploitation. Then don't sign it. If I don't, the stock value drops. The board could remove me. Everything my father built. Would your father want you to compromise children's privacy to save his legacy? The words hung between them. Hard. True. Nolan's phone buzzed. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Eliana sat with June through the night, holding her hand, signing stories to keep her calm. June whispered, barely audible, "He's afraid of disappointing people. Always has been." "He's afraid of the wrong things," Eliana said softly. In the glass boardroom high above Boston, Caleb Rourke was making his case. Slides, projections, reassurances about market response and competitive positioning. We'll reframe the girlfriend situation into a humanizing story, CEO in love, very relatable. Meanwhile, this data deal stabilizes revenue and positions us for the next funding round. Caleb leaned forward. Sign it, Nolan. Be a CEO, not a kindergarten teacher. Nolan stared at the contract on the screen. Thought of his father's last words. Make an impact. Thought of Eliana's steady hands guiding June through panic. Thought of 30 children in a library, silent and seen because someone truly listened. He closed the laptop with a decisive click. No. Caleb's face went dangerously still. Excuse me. I said no. We're not selling student data. Nolan's voice was calm, final. We're convening an independent data ethics committee. We're pausing all student data initiatives until we have transparent, parent-approved consent frameworks. The board expects results. The board will hear my recommendation. You're suspended, Caleb, pending an internal investigation. Nolan stood. I want to know who leaked our project details and who authorized that press attack on Eliana. Caleb's laugh was sharp, bitter. You're throwing away $40 million over feelings. You've gone soft, Nolan. The market has no room for fairy tales. Maybe I have gone soft, but it's my choice to make. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is say a single word. Nolan walked out of his own boardroom and drove straight to the hospital. Past midnight now. The city was quiet, rain turning the streets into mirrors reflecting neon and streetlights. In the car, his hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, knuckles white. He'd just walked away from $40 million. He'd suspended his chief operating officer. He'd possibly ended his own career. But all he could think about was Eliana's face when he'd accused her of using his mother. He found her asleep in the chair beside June's bed, her hand still holding his mother's. She'd pulled her knees up, made herself small, the way shy people do when they're trying not to take up space. Her hair had fallen across her face. There were tear tracks on her cheeks. He stood in the doorway watching them, these two women who'd opened something he'd kept locked for years. Vulnerability. Connection. The possibility that impact wasn't measured in stock prices, but in moments like this. His mother fragile but peaceful. Eliana exhausted but present. Both of them here not because they had to be, but because they chose to be. His throat tightened. When had he last chosen presence over performance? June opened her eyes, saw him standing there in his rumpled suit, looking more uncertain than she'd seen him since he was a boy who'd just lost his father. She signed weakly, "Tell her. Tell her what you did. Tell her why." Nolan nodded, understanding. His mother was giving him permission to be vulnerable, to admit he'd been wrong, to ask for something without having all the power. He touched Eliana's shoulder, gently feeling the warmth of her through the thin cardigan. She startled awake eyes, confused for a moment, before focusing on him. "Walk with me." In the hospital corridor, rain streaking the windows, city lights blurred beyond the antiseptic smell of the hospital, mixing with the faint scent of her lavender soap. Nolan said the hardest words he'd ever spoken. "I kept choosing work because it was easier than choosing people, easier than risking loss." He met her eyes. "I thought control meant strength. But watching you with my mother, you're not afraid to be present, to be needed. That's real strength." Eliana's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I kept putting work first so long I forgot to ask what you really needed. I'm sorry." Her eyes searched his face. "I need the truth. I need you to choose what's right, not choose me. I just killed the data deal. Caleb's suspended, there'll be an independent audit. If I lose the CEO position, so be it. Because you taught me that real power isn't in the signature that closes the deal. It's in the ability to stop when something is wrong." Something in her chest unlocked, surprise blooming into admiration. "Then we can keep talking." His hand found hers. Finally, fully. They stood there, two people who'd spent years believing they had to be more than they were learning they were already enough. Back in June's room, she was awake, smiling knowingly through the oxygen support. "Took you long enough," she signed. Over the next week, fallout was intense. An independent forensic team discovered Caleb had orchestrated both the press leak and forged email communications from the library to Whitaker Innovations, all to pressure Nolan into the data deal while he was emotionally vulnerable. Caleb was escorted from the building. Civil investigation opened for data privacy violations. Stock value dipped. Technology blogs speculated about Nolan's direction. Shareholders expressed concern. But something else happened. Parents' groups praised the decision. Education advocates amplified it. 3 other educational technology companies quietly followed suit, establishing ethics boards. The narrative shifted from CEO loses edge to CEO leads industry reform. This inspirational stand changed the entire sector. Eliana watched from the library where she was training a new sign language storytelling volunteer. Nolan had moved temporarily to Boston, taking meetings from his mother's apartment, refusing to leave her side during recovery. One evening, he appeared at the library just as she was closing. "I have something to show you." He drove her to Riverside, not the apartments, but an empty storefront 2 blocks away. "This building's been vacant 3 years. I purchased it last week." "Why?" "Because I'm moving Whitaker's satellite office here, Boston base. I'll split time between here and New York, but I want to be where my mother is, where you are. I'm not restructuring, I'm rebalancing." He unlocked the door. Inside, architectural plans covered a folding table. Ground floor reading and technology cultural center. Free access, multilingual, fully accessible, partnered with Riverside Library. Eliana's breath caught. "I need a program advisor, someone who understands both education and community. Someone kids trust." He turned to her. "This isn't charity. This is a job you're overqualified for. You'll have final authority on all programming. This honors your expertise." She touched the plans, reading Nook's computer stations, a soundproof sign language video recording studio. This is real as I know how to make things. They worked late into the night over the next weeks, drafting his remarks for the opening. Finally, they had it. We've built a space where children's potential is honored, not harvested, where learning is a right, not a commodity, where the smallest voice matters most. The night before the opening, after the rain stopped, they stood under the library eaves. Nolan pulled out a small velvet box, vintage, clearly precious. This was my grandmother's. My father gave it to my mother when they got engaged. She wants you to have it. Inside, a delicate gold band with a small, perfect sapphire. An heirloom to begin a family with kindness. It's a promise ring, he said carefully. A commitment to building something together. Partners. Eliana's eyes filled. I won't promise the whole world, only that my world will include you. She smiled through tears. I'll say yes as long as that world has a reading corner for every child. He slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They kissed under the streetlights, gentle, certain, full of promise. Love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day for the small, sacred things. June came home from the hospital on a Tuesday, stronger but still fragile. Eliana had filled her apartment with flowers, daisies for cheer jasmine, because June said they reminded her of her teaching days. You didn't have to do this, June said, but her eyes shone with something more than gratitude. Relief, maybe. The relief of knowing she wasn't forgotten, wasn't a burden, wasn't invisible. I wanted to, Eliana said simply, arranging the jasmine near the window where the afternoon light would catch it. They sat together that first afternoon, drinking tea, not saying much. Sometimes the most healing conversations are the ones that don't require words. June would sign something small, comfortable, or grateful, and Eliana would sign back, always here, or family. That evening, when Nolan arrived with groceries and his laptop, he found them asleep on the couch. June's head on Eliana's shoulder, a documentary about elementary education playing softly on the television. He stood there for 5 full minutes just watching, memorizing the scene. This was what he'd been working toward his entire life without knowing it. Not wealth, not influence, but this quiet moment of people caring for each other. He took a photo with his phone. Not for social media, not for anyone else. Just for himself. To remember what mattered. Over the next month, something quietly miraculous happened. The Riverside community shifted. Nolan's presence, low-key consistent, showed that wealth didn't require distance. He attended building meetings where Mrs. Chen taught him about the elevator's quirks. He fixed her leaking sink on a Saturday morning, getting his hands dirty, laughing when he couldn't figure out the wrench and had to call the super for help. He played chess with Mr. Okoye in the lobby, losing most games, but learning about Mr. Okoye's grandchildren in Nigeria, about the engineering career he'd had before retiring, about the small joys of a life well lived. Eliana watched him integrate, not intrude. He listened more than spoke. He asked, "What does this neighborhood actually need?" instead of assuming answers. This inspirational approach earned genuine respect, not because of his money, but because of his presence. One evening, old Mr. Petrova from the 3rd floor stopped Nolan in the hallway. "You know what's different about you," he said in his thick accent. "You show up. Not like charity, like neighbor." Nolan felt something shift in his chest. "Thank you," he said, and meant it more than any business award he'd ever received. The Reading and Technology Cultural Center took shape. Local contractors, resident input on design, kids from the library helped choose paint colors. One wall became a mural of favorite book characters. Eliana watched a 7-year-old deaf girl carefully paint the wild things. her face serious with concentration, and thought about how this space would change lives the way June's anonymous donations had changed hers. The Data Ethics Committee concluded its investigation. Caleb had violated multiple protocols, including unauthorized data sharing and corporate espionage. Civil charges were filed. He left the industry entirely, his reputation destroyed by his own choices. Nolan issued a company-wide message about accountability and implemented mandatory ethics training for all staff. But the biggest change was internal. Nolan started declining requests, late meetings, weekend work sessions, anything that pulled him from people who mattered. His executive assistant was shocked the first time he said, "No, I'm having dinner with my mother that night." By the third time, she started smiling when she rescheduled things. He had dinner with June 3 times weekly. He showed up at Eliana's story times, sitting in back, with a volunteer badge, learning how to read picture books with proper dramatic flair. He learned basic sign language slowly, imperfectly, but earnestly. The kids at the library thought it was hilarious when he signed elephant, but accidentally signed telephone. "You're different," June observed one evening over tea, watching him laugh at his own mistakes. "I'm trying to remember who I am," Nolan said. "Or maybe who I was supposed to be before I got scared." Eliana squeezed his hand. "You always were that person. You just forgot." 2 days before the center's opening, June pulled Eliana aside, her grip surprisingly strong despite the frailty. "I need to tell you something, child." Her voice was serious. "I won't be here forever. Please don't say that." "Listen." June's eyes held hers. "I've spent my life teaching children, but you taught my son how to be whole. That's a gift I can never repay. When I'm gone, he'll need you. Not to fix him, just to remind him what matters. Promise me you'll keep telling stories. Keep making invisible children seen." Eliana hugged her, feeling the fragility of bones, the strength of spirit. "I promise." Opening day arrived with spring sunshine and nervous energy. Eliana wore simple blue. Nolan wore jeans, June's suggestion, and a company shirt that read, "Learning Matters." June wore lavender and the biggest smile Eliana had ever seen. Families poured in. Children ran to the reading nook. Parents examined technology stations designed for accessibility, not surveillance. A local news crew filmed, but mostly there was laughter and this heartwarming sense of community. June cut the ribbon with ceremony scissors, winking at the crowd. "Told you she's the best storyteller." Real transformation happens in the quiet choices no one sees until suddenly everyone does. The first official story time began. Eliana read The Giving Tree, signing every word. 30 children, hearing deaf from different backgrounds and abilities, sat transfixed. Nolan watched from the back row wearing his reading volunteer badge and felt something expand in his chest. Gratitude, purpose, peace. A mother approached afterward, eyes wet. "My daughter is deaf. She's never had someone read to her like that." She felt seen. Eliana knelt to the girl's level, signed, "You are seen. Always." The mother hugged her. Nolan witnessed the exchange and understood this was real impact. At the small reception, Dr. Ava Collins appeared with a framed certificate from the hospital, recognizing Eliana for exceptional civilian emergency response. June beamed with pride. Mara, Eliana's library friend, admitted sheepishly, "Okay, I was wrong about the CEO. He's good people." As the day wound down, June gathered them both. "I want to make a toast." She lifted her juice box with mock ceremony. "To my son who remembered why he started building things. To Eliana who taught an old teacher that kindness is a language everyone understands. And to every child who walks through these doors believing they're invisible, may you always find someone who sees you." They clinked juice boxes, laughed, held each other. That night, Nolan and Eliana walked the Charles River path they'd walked months ago, same route, transformed people. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm grateful I answered the phone at 3:17 in the morning. That my mother is still here. That you're still here." He stopped walking. "That I want to keep showing up for you, for this work, for the kids who need us. Then keep showing up. Will you, every day?" They kissed under the streetlights, two people who'd learned that love wasn't about being extraordinary. It was about being extraordinarily present. 3 months later, Whitaker Innovations published the industry's first comprehensive data ethics standards for children's educational technology. 12 companies signed on immediately. It became the blueprint for federal regulation, an inspirational model that protected millions of children. The center served 200 children in its first quarter. June volunteered twice weekly teaching handwriting to anyone interested. Nolan split time between Boston and New York, but never missed a Friday story time. This shy girl, Eliana, stopped believing she was invisible. She'd learned the truth she'd been seen all along by the people who mattered most. And on quiet evenings, when the center was empty and the city lights glowed beyond the windows, Nolan would find Eliana reading in the corner, where it all began, surrounded by children's books, wearing the sapphire ring, finally home. One small act of kindness at 3 in the morning can change everything. For everyone.